I was working the front desk at a hostel in Amsterdam when an American family walked in at 11 at night. The dad immediately started talking at full volume about how excited they were to finally arrive. I mean, this guy was practically shouting. His voice echoed through the entire lobby. I put my finger to my lips and whispered that other guests were already sleeping. He looked confused and said, "But it's only 11. That's not even late." In the Netherlands, 11 p.m. is absolutely late for loud conversations in shared spaces. Our quiet hours start at 10. I explained this as gently as I could. He nodded. But then, 5 minutes later, I heard him in the hallway telling his kids to hurry up and unpack, still at that same volume. The other guests started complaining within 10 minutes. When I knocked on their door to remind them about the noise policy, he seemed genuinely surprised. "We're just talking normally," he said. Normal for him, maybe. Not normal for everyone trying to sleep on the other side of those thin walls. Another American once asked me why European hotel rooms don't have ice machines. She was standing in the middle of our small Berlin hotel lobby, holding an empty ice bucket she'd apparently brought from home. I told her most Europeans don't put ice in their drinks the way Americans do. She looked at me like I'd just told her we don't use electricity. "But how do you keep your drinks cold?" she asked. I pointed out that our fridges work just fine, and most people are okay with drinks that aren't freezing. She spent the next 2 minutes explaining why room temperature water was unhealthy. I didn't have the heart to tell her that most of the world disagrees. Then there was the guy in Prague who got upset because the restaurant wouldn't split the bill 12 different ways. He and his friends had ordered together, eaten together, and now wanted individual receipts with exact calculations for who ate what. The waiter politely explained that wasn't how it worked there. The American pulled out his phone and started doing math, trying to figure out his exact portion down to the cent. Meanwhile, his friends just divided it roughly and moved on. But this guy insisted on precision. He held up the table for 15 minutes. The waiter eventually just brought one bill and walked away. The whole restaurant was watching. I've collected so many of these stories over the years, some from my own experiences working in tourism, some from friends across Europe and Asia, some from online forums where locals share their most memorable encounters. And here's the thing. Most of these situations aren't mean-spirited. They're just cultural gaps. Americans doing what feels normal to them, not realizing it reads completely differently somewhere else. The confusion goes both ways, honestly. But when you see the same patterns over and over, the same surprised reactions, the same, "Wait, that's not how everyone does it?" moments, it starts to paint a picture. So let me walk you through some of the most memorable stories about Americans abroad who misread the local rules in the funniest ways possible. My cousin worked at a train station in Germany for 3 years. One morning, an American tourist approached her window and asked for a ticket to Europe. My cousin paused, then gently explained that he was already in Europe. He shook his head. "No, I mean real Europe, like the Europe part." She asked him to clarify. Turns out he thought Germany was just Germany, and Europe was a specific city or region you could travel to. She spent 5 minutes with a map showing him how the continent worked. He seemed embarrassed, but also a little defensive, like maybe the map was wrong. That same week, another American asked why the train schedule showed times like 22:30. He wanted to know what that meant in normal time. When my cousin explained it was 10:30 p.m. in 24-hour format, he asked why they couldn't just use regular numbers. She told him this was regular for most of the world. He frowned and said it seemed unnecessarily complicated. Then he missed his train because he showed up at 10:30 in the morning instead. A friend who works at a London airport told me about a woman who arrived and immediately asked where she could exchange her dollars for British. Not British pounds, just British. When my friend clarified the currency name, the woman said, "Right, that's what I meant, the British money." Later, this same woman got frustrated at a coffee shop because they wouldn't accept her dollars. She genuinely didn't understand why a London cafe wouldn't take American cash. "But dollars are universal," she said. The barista had to explain that no, they really aren't. In Italy, a pizzeria owner told me about an American couple who ordered a pizza and then asked for ranch dressing. When he said they didn't have ranch, they asked what people usually put on pizza there. He said, nothing. The pizza is already complete. They looked skeptical. The woman asked if they could at least have ketchup. He brought them olive oil and balsamic vinegar as a compromise, trying to be helpful. They barely touched it. On their way out, they told him the pizza was too plain and left a 2-star review online saying the restaurant had no condiments. One of my favorite stories comes from a hostel worker in Barcelona. An American guest asked her how to get to Barcelona. She didn't understand at first. He repeated it slower. Barcelona. Finally, she realized he meant Barcelona, but he was pronouncing it like the English word Bart. She corrected him gently, explaining the local pronunciation. He insisted that his guidebook spelled it with a C, so it must be pronounced with a hard C sound. She tried explaining that Spanish pronunciation doesn't work that way, but he just said, "Well, that's confusing," and walked away, still saying Barcelona. There was also the American in Paris who complained that people kept speaking French to him. He'd asked for directions in English, and locals responded in French. He took this as rudeness. Why don't they just speak English? He asked someone at his hotel. The front desk person pointed out that he was in France, where French is the primary language. He replied that English was the universal language, so everyone should know it. The front desk person, who was trilingual, just smiled politely and said nothing. A cafe worker in Vienna told me about an American who ordered a coffee and then asked why it came in such a small cup. She explained it was an espresso. He said he wanted a normal coffee, like from Starbucks. She offered him an Americano, which is espresso with water. He tasted it and said it wasn't the same. She asked what he wanted it to taste like. He said, like coffee. She gave up and made him something with more milk and sugar. He finally seemed satisfied but told her, "You guys should really learn how to make regular coffee here." Another story from Germany. An American family went to a bakery and got upset that everything was sold by weight, not by item. They wanted to know how much one bread cost. The baker explained they needed to choose a size first, and then it would be weighed. The dad said this was too much math for breakfast and asked if they could just pay a flat rate. The baker, trying to be accommodating, suggested a standard-sized loaf and named a price. The dad then asked if they could get a discount for buying multiple loaves. The baker explained the price was already based on weight, so buying more just meant paying for more weight. The dad left confused, saying German bakeries were complicated. In Greece, a taverna owner told me about Americans who asked for Greek food, but not too Greek. They wanted moussaka, but without eggplant. They wanted Greek salad, but without olives or feta. They wanted souvlaki, but with ketchup instead of tzatziki. By the end, the owner had basically made them plain grilled chicken with lettuce and tomatoes. They said it was great and asked why more Greek restaurants didn't serve food like this. One last one from this batch. A museum guide in Rome told me about an American tourist who asked if the Colosseum was built to look old on purpose. The guide didn't understand the question at first. The tourist clarified. Did they make it look like ruins for the tourists? Or was it actually old? The guide explained it was genuinely ancient, nearly 2,000 years old. The tourist seemed doubtful. But it looks too old to be real, he said. The guide assured him it was absolutely real. The tourist took photos but still seemed unconvinced. I once watched an American woman walk into a Japanese restaurant in Kyoto wearing her shoes. The staff immediately rushed over, gesturing at the entrance where everyone's shoes were neatly lined up. She looked down at the shoes, then at her own feet, then said, "Oh, I thought those were just for decoration." The staff politely brought her slippers and showed her where to leave her sneakers. She seemed mortified, but also confused about why it mattered. "My shoes are clean," she whispered to her husband. He shrugged. A friend who worked in a Swedish office told me about an American intern who would greet everyone loudly every single morning. "Good morning, Linda." "Hey, Eric." "Morning, Anna." He'd go around the entire office like he was hosting a talk show. In Sweden, people generally keep greetings minimal and quiet, especially in the morning. After a week, someone finally pulled him aside and explained that the enthusiastic greetings were a bit much. He seemed hurt. "I was just being friendly," he said. They assured him it wasn't personal, just a cultural difference. He toned it down, but clearly felt like he was being unfriendly by doing so. Then there's tipping. Oh, the tipping stories. An American couple in Australia left a 20% tip at a cafe and seemed proud of themselves for being generous. The waiter chased them down the street to return the money, thinking they'd made a mistake. They insisted it was a tip. He explained that Australian workers earn fair wages and don't rely on tips. They looked uncomfortable, like they'd accidentally insulted him. "But how will you know we appreciated the service?" the woman asked. He said a simple thank you was enough. They took the money back, but seemed confused the entire time. In Norway, an American guest at a dinner party asked for seconds before everyone had finished their firsts. The host looked startled but said nothing. Later, the guest asked for thirds while others were still on seconds. The host's wife whispered to her husband in Norwegian, and he explained to the guest that it's customary to wait until everyone finishes each course. The American laughed and said, "Oh, we don't do that formal stuff back home." The other guests exchanged glances, but stayed polite. After dinner, the host told my friend it was the most stressful meal he'd ever hosted. A store clerk in France told me about an American who got upset that the shop closed for 2 hours at lunch. "But I need to buy something now," he said. The clerk explained that lunch breaks are standard in France, and the shop would reopen at 2. The American asked if someone could stay open just for him since he was a tourist. The clerk said no, everyone was going to lunch. The American muttered something about customer service and left. He came back at 2, bought his item without speaking, and left again. My favorite etiquette story comes from Finland. An American woman at a bus stop kept trying to make small talk with strangers. "Crazy weather, huh?" she'd say. People would give brief nods and look away. She tried again. "Long wait for the bus today." More polite nods. She turned to my Finnish friend and said, "Wow, people here are so serious." My friend explained that Finns generally don't chat with strangers in public. The woman seemed shocked. "But how do you make friends?" My friend said, "Not at bus stops." In Portugal, an American asked a waiter why dinner service didn't start until 8 p.m. The waiter said, "That's just when people eat dinner there." The American said 8 was too late, that he'd be starving by then. The waiter suggested having a snack in the afternoon. The American said that wouldn't work with his schedule. The waiter didn't know what else to say, so he just apologized. The American ate at a tourist-focused restaurant at 6 instead, and later wrote online that Portuguese restaurants had weird hours. A Swiss colleague told me about an American who showed up 15 minutes late to a business meeting and didn't apologize. In Switzerland, being on time is serious. The meeting had already started without him. When he arrived, he casually said, "Sorry, traffic," and sat down like nothing was wrong. The Swiss clients were visibly uncomfortable. After the meeting, my colleague had to explain that punctuality was extremely important there. The American said, 15 minutes isn't even late. That's basically on time." My colleague didn't know how to respond to that. In Denmark, an American family walked into someone's home without taking off their shoes. The host stopped them at the door, pointing to the shoe rack. They seemed surprised but complied. Later, the kids started running around the house, jumping on furniture. The host's children sat quietly in the corner, watching with wide eyes. The American parents didn't intervene. Eventually, the Danish host asked if they could keep the noise down a bit. The American mom said, "Kids will be kids." The host just nodded, but later told my friend it was the longest afternoon of her life. A bartender in Ireland told me about an American who ordered an Irish car bomb and seemed confused when the bartender refused. The bartender explained that the drink's name references a painful part of Irish history and isn't something locals appreciate. The American said he'd ordered it 1,000,000 times in Boston with no problem. The bartender replied, "This isn't Boston." The American left without ordering anything else. One more. A sauna attendant in Iceland told me about Americans who wore swimsuits into the communal sauna. When locals gestured that swimsuits weren't allowed, the Americans refused to remove them. They said they weren't comfortable being naked around strangers. The locals tried explaining it was standard practice and actually more hygienic. The Americans left the sauna entirely, later posting online that Icelandic saunas were weird and uncomfortable. The attendant said it happens more often than you'd think. A pharmacy worker in Canada told me about an American who needed medicine and got frustrated when the dosage was listed in milliliters instead of teaspoons. She asked if they had normal measurements. The pharmacist explained that milliliters are the standard medical measurement worldwide. She said that seemed inconvenient for travelers. The pharmacist offered to convert it for her. She reluctantly agreed, but said American pharmacies would never make things this complicated. In the UK, an American renting a car asked why the speed limit signs didn't show miles per hour. The rental agent explained they were in miles per hour already. The American pointed at a sign that said 30 and asked how that could possibly be 30 miles per hour. That seemed way too slow for a main road. The agent explained that, yes, 30 miles per hour is a common speed limit in residential areas there. The American said that in the US, those roads would be 45 or 50. The agent just said, "Well, here it's 30. A hotel receptionist in Spain told me about an American who wrote the date as 9/11 on his check-in form, and then got confused when the system rejected it. The receptionist looked at the date and realized the confusion. She explained that in Europe, the format is day, month, year. So he'd accidentally written the 9th of November instead of September 11th. He stared at the form, then at her, then said, "But why would you put the day first? The month is more important." She said it was just how dates work there. He reluctantly rewrote it, but kept saying it felt backward. In Germany, an American at a grocery store asked why the milk wasn't refrigerated. The store employee explained it was UHT milk, which doesn't need refrigeration until opened. The American said that seemed unsafe. The employee assured her it was perfectly safe and very common in Europe. The American bought it anyway, but later told her friends she was pretty sure she'd bought spoiled milk, even though it was fine. A British colleague told me about an American coworker who kept scheduling meetings for dates that didn't make sense. He'd write 6/8/2023 and show up on the wrong day. Eventually, they figured out he was using month, day, year, while everyone else used day, month, year. They asked him to write out the month's name to avoid confusion. He did, but also complained that having two different date systems was inefficient. My colleague pointed out that most of the world uses day, month, year, so really it's the American system that's the outlier. He didn't seem convinced. In Australia, an American asked a hardware store employee for a 2x4 piece of wood. The employee asked if he meant 50 by 100 millimeters. The American looked lost. The employee explained that Australia uses metric measurements. The American said he just wanted a normal 2x4. The employee tried to clarify what dimensions he actually needed. The American pulled up a photo on his phone. They eventually figured it out. But the American left muttering about how much easier Home Depot was. A friend in France told me about an American who complained that his phone's weather app was broken because it showed the temperature as 20 degrees. "It's not 20 degrees out here, it's warm," he said. My friend explained that it was 20 degrees Celsius, which is about 68 Fahrenheit. The American said, "Why doesn't it just show the real temperature?" My friend said that the real temperature is Celsius. The American changed his phone settings, but later said the metric system was unnecessarily confusing. In the Netherlands, an American asked a grocery store worker why a 2-liter bottle of soda seemed so big. The worker said it's 2 liters, which is standard. The American said he was used to buying soda in gallons or 12-ounce cans. The worker didn't know what to tell him. The American ended up buying a smaller bottle, but said European portion sizes were weird. A doctor's office in Ireland dealt with an American patient who listed his weight as 180 on the form. The nurse asked if that was in kilograms or pounds. He said pounds. She converted it and wrote it down in kilograms. He saw the number and panicked, thinking he'd somehow gained weight. She explained it was just the conversion. He said it was confusing to see a different number. She said most countries use kilograms for medical measurements. He said America should really be included in that most countries group. In Sweden, an American visiting a friend asked why the thermostat was set to 22. He said that seemed way too cold. The friend explained it was 22 degrees Celsius, which is about 72 Fahrenheit. The American said, "Why not just say 72 then?" The friend said because Sweden uses Celsius. The American adjusted it to what he thought was warmer, but actually made the room colder because he mixed up the scales. They had to fix it later. A gas station worker in Italy told me about an American who got upset that gas was priced per liter instead of per gallon. He tried doing the math in his head, got frustrated, and asked if they could just charge him in gallons. The worker said that wasn't possible. The American paid but said filling up his rental car was more stressful than it should be. Finally, a Canadian border agent told me about an American who listed his height as 5'10" on his entry form. The agent asked him to convert it to centimeters. The American said he didn't know how. The agent did it for him. The American looked at the number, 178 centimeters, and said it didn't look right, that it seemed too tall. The agent assured him the conversion was correct. The American reluctantly accepted it, but said the metric system makes everything sound wrong. Here's one last story that ties a lot of this together. I was at a cafe in Brussels, sitting next to 2 Americans who were talking about their trip. One of them was flipping through a guidebook, clearly frustrated. "Everything here is so different," she said. Her friend nodded. "I know, right? Like, why can't they just do things the normal way?" I didn't say anything, but I thought about that phrase, the normal way. It's such a small thing, but it shows up in so many of these stories. The assumption that the way you do things back home is the default, and everything else is a weird variation. That tipping is normal, so countries without tipping culture must be missing something. That Fahrenheit is normal, so Celsius is needlessly complicated. That your pronunciation is correct, so the local pronunciation must be wrong. The truth is, there's no universal normal. Every culture has its own systems, etiquette rules, and ways of doing things that make perfect sense to the people who grew up with them. What feels natural in New York might feel bizarre in Tokyo. What's polite in Texas might be rude in Stockholm. And that's fine. That's actually what makes travel interesting. Most Americans I've met abroad are genuinely trying their best. They're not trying to be difficult. They're just navigating a world that doesn't match their reference points. And honestly, locals mess up too when they visit the US. I've heard plenty of stories about Europeans confused by American tipping culture, or Asians baffled by American portion sizes, or Australians surprised by how much small talk Americans make with strangers. But here's the thing. These misunderstandings are funny. They're harmless. They're the kind of stories that make you laugh later, even if they're awkward in the moment. The American who brought an ice bucket to Germany, the guy who wanted ranch dressing on his Italian pizza, the woman who thought the Colosseum was fake. These aren't villains. They're just people experiencing culture shock in real time. And the stories keep coming. Every week, someone sends me a new one. A friend in Portugal, a cousin in Japan, a co-worker in Norway. They all have their own versions of, "You won't believe what happened today." I've started collecting them, not to mock anyone, but because they reveal something true about how we all see the world. We think our normal is everyone's normal, until we leave home and realize it's not. So if you've ever been that confused American abroad, or if you've ever witnessed one, just know you're part of a long tradition. Travel is messy. Culture is complicated. And sometimes the best thing you can do is laugh at the absurdity, learn from it, and remember to take your shoes off at the door next time. Trust me, these stories never